Do you like being more accurate than all of your other party members? Do you like guns? If the answers to these questions are yes, the Operative is the class for you. Hello folks, Phil Gallagher, aka Thraben, you here for another Starfinder 2nd Edition video, and welcome to my Operative guide. Let's do the bureaucratic stuff before we get started here. As a reminder, Starfinder 2nd Edition is completely compatible with Pathfinder 2nd Edition, so if you like Pathfinder, you're going to like this stuff too. I'm going to be spending about 40 hours this week making daily Starfinder 2nd Edition content. So if you like this content and you want to see more of it in the future, please consider subscribing to the channel. And if you are in the position to support me financially, a YouTube membership would give you early access to all of my videos and do a lot to make this channel financially viable. So the structure today is going to be slightly different from the other videos that I have done this week. 3 of the 4 sections are going to be the same. We're still going to talk about what is the Operative, we're still going to evaluate the subclasses, and we're still going to talk about the notable and best feats. However, there's not going to be a why do you play the Operative section, because, well, the answer is very obvious. It has a +2 in accuracy with guns over all the other classes. You can, kind of wrap a bow on that one already. So instead, for that section, we are going to focus on how this class differs from the Gunslinger from Pathfinder 2nd Edition, as that is a class that has that +2 accuracy, that expert at level 1 with guns, and so there has to be a difference between those, right? And there absolutely is. So without further ado, let's get into the Operative. The Operative's core stats are probably exactly what you would expect. They are dex-based, they have reasonable hit points, expert in perception, expert in 2 saving throws, and most importantly, expert in simple guns, martial guns, trained in advanced guns. So it is just very clear from page 1 of this what it is that this class is trying to do. This is your dex-based, high accuracy ranged class. And their primary class feature is something called aim. So this happens when you are wielding a ranged weapon that doesn't have the area trait. You aim at a single creature, and until your next turn, your ranged strikes against your mark using the required ranged weapon deal an additional 1d4 precision damage, and reduce the circumstance bonus to your AC your mark gains from cover by 1. And this only applies in your first range increment, and you only get 1 mark at a time, unless you do something later on with, say, a feat to make it so that you can aim at more than one person. And just like any sort of sneak attack-like feature, the number of dice for this is going to scale up by 1 at 5th, 11th, and 17th level. But you also get to start reducing the cover bonus by more and more as time goes on. At 11th level, you reduce that by 2. At 17th level, you reduce it by 4 instead. You are going to get a subclass called your Operative's Specialization that is going to give you a small bonus of some kind. These are not super extensive subclasses for the most part, with the exception of the Striker, which is going to give you some melee options instead. That's the most important stuff as far as the core of the class is concerned. Most of this class's power budget is in that expert in guns that you are getting as of level 1. So I'm going to highlight a few other things here. The focused ability you get at 3rd level is pretty strong. When you roll a success on a reflex save against your mark, you get a critical success instead. So if you are in a boss fight scenario, you have, one thing that is your mark, you can be very good against its reflex saves, which I think is going to be much more relevant in Starfinder because you are going to get reflex saves against like some area damage. What are the other words? Like area fire, auto fire sort of things that are going to require reflex saves, in addition to just things like spells. Now, you are going to get the normal skill increases every other level that you might expect, but you are also going to get some bonus skill feats for your subclass. With the specialized skill set ability at 3rd, 7th, and 15th level, you get a skill feat, and it must be used for the trained skill from your Operative Specialization, and again, that's your subclass. We are going to see the fighter slash gunslinger levels of proficiency increases with guns, where you are going to be a step ahead of everybody else for most of your career. I do like the operative's edge at level 7th. Level 7, which is a +2 circumstance bonus to initiative rolls. And there's a cool thing here where if you take incredible initiative, which would be giving you the same bonus, your circumstance bonus to initiative rolls becomes +3 instead. And when you are a high accuracy, high damage character, it is possible that you can take out or critically wound some foes before they really get going. Especially if you are facing, level -2 enemies or something like that. And while there are some other class features that they are going to get, obviously, that's kind of good enough to get the gist of the character. So let's talk about how this is different than the Gunslinger. And I think the place to start is by looking at the aim ability. So as a reminder, aim is one action that lasts until the end of your turn, and you add an additional 1d4 of precision damage while also reducing the cover bonus. This is objectively less damage than with Slinger's precision, which, assuming that you are using a firearm, which we are going to assume for the point of this comparison here, you are just getting an additional 1d6 worth of precision damage instead. So you are trading one damage die degree, a d4 to a d6. And in exchange, the operative gets that reduction of cover bonus, which I think tends not to be overly relevant in Pathfinder, but it does come up, especially if you have a whole bunch of allies and, they are getting in the way of your shots. So in terms of the damage die difference, I don't think that matters too much. I think that comes out in the wash, so to speak. But there's an action economy difference, right? So this is something that just happens all of the time, whereas aim is something that requires an action, and it is going to keep requiring an action. So why does that difference exist? There's a very good reason for it. And it has to do with the difference of weapons within the systems. The gunslinger bonuses specifically apply to things that you have to reload, right? Be that crossbows or firearms. But in Starfinder, a bunch of the weapons have some sort of capacity trait where they have a certain number of projectiles or maybe a certain number of bullets in them that you have to use before you reload. So in Starfinder, you have to reload less frequently. And a bunch of the Gunslinger's power budget is going into things like running reload that give you action compression while reloading. Well, that's not something that the operative is getting because they are not expected to reload their guns as frequently. Or maybe if you are playing an ancestry that has multiple sets of arms, after your first gun runs out of bullets, you just take one action, switch arms, go to your other gun, and you go from there. So fundamentally, even though Pathfinder and Starfinder are, basically 100% compatible, there are differences in expectations with things like items between the system. And I think that is what's going on with the difference between the Gunslinger and the Operative. The Operative is kind of built under the assumption that you are going to be using Starfinder guns, and you're going to have, some potential 2-action activities from your guns, and you're going to have to reload less frequently. So I think it makes sense that some of the action economy of the Operative is eaten up with this aim action so that they don't just end up being better than the Gunslinger in a ton of situations. So I don't think the Operative is a power-crept Gunslinger or anything like that. I think the two classes have slightly different niches. Now, of note here with the aim trait, it does require that your ranged weapon doesn't have the area trait, but it doesn't say anything about the auto-fire trait. So you still will have an opportunity to do 2-action reflex save-based damage. In terms of the Starfinder weapons, another advantage that the Operative is going to have going for it is that there are more damage types available on guns. So there are more weapon groups now, like you see corrosive and shock and laser here. So we can end up with things like acid, electricity, and fire damage on these ranged weapons now. So the Operative will also have opportunities to potentially switch weapons to trigger weaknesses, which is pretty cool. And if you take a look at the magazine column here, you can see like 5 projectiles, 10 charges, 20 projectiles. A ton of these weapons are going to end up having capacity, meaning that you don't have to reload immediately. Although some of the actions that you take will end up consuming more than one charge or round of your magazine at the same time. I will say that fewer of the guns in this system end up with the fatal trait, which was very, very common on the Pathfinder 2nd Edition guns. Some of them are still there, but they tend to be on the things that have a single projectile. I am still internalizing all of the various gun traits and options, so I'm not going to deep dive on recommended weapons today specifically, but there is some really cool stuff out there. And the fact that some ancestries have, 3 sets of arms like the Skittermander means that you could be wielding a ton of guns, which is pretty cool in terms of options being afforded to you. Kind of rounding out this section, I think if you want singular big hits, the Gunslinger is often going to be better than that, as the D12 weapons are often single capacities in their magazine. And so if you are trying to go like, all right, I want this fatal D12, I want to hit like a truck very consistently, I think that is going to require frequent reloads, and the Gunslinger's action compression there is potentially going to be better. Whereas if you don't want to use actions reloading, and you would like consistent ranged damage, maybe with the ability to do area damage as well via auto fire, then I think the Operative is going to be more attractive in that capacity. All right, so now let's do subclasses, which again, we're going to call those the Operative Specialization this time around. Generally speaking, the subclasses don't add a lot to the gameplay experience. You're going to get some skill trainings for it, and you're probably going to get something like 1 extra action or 1 extra skill feat from it. But generally speaking, most of this class's power budget is from that extra step in proficiency with your ranged weapons. The first up is Ghost, which is deception based. So you're going to get trained in deception and a skill feat for deception specifically. And as a reminder, as you level up, you are going to get more skill feats for deception specifically. And the exploit action you are going to get is you can aim at targets you're undetected by as a free action, which I think is not going to come up all that much. Now, later on, you are going to get an advanced exploit that can make it easier for you to become undetected, but that comes at 9th level. So for most people playing this class, they might not even reach that level, meaning I don't think you get a lot from that subclass. I would give Ghost a thumbs down. Next up is the Infiltrator, and this is going to give you training in computers and a skill feat for computers. Note that this is not a skill that is in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and this one is unique to Starfinder. Computers and piloting are new skills. And you are going to get the Sabotage action, which, long story short, it allows you to give the glitching trait to things with tech. And as a reminder, the new glitching status effect is going to give you a flat check equal to 5 plus your condition value. So if you are glitching 1, that is going to be a DC 6 flat check. On a critical success, you reduce your glitching value by 1. On a success, everything's fine. On a failure, you take an item penalty to all of your checks and DCs equal to your glitching value, which is often going to be 1, or the glitching value of the item you're attempting to use. So this is going to include saving throws, attack modifiers, DCs, spells, all that sort of stuff. And on a critical failure, you just lose the action that you attempted to do. Or the glitching creature would get the same effect as the failure and also be stunned 1. So, like, pretty respectable status effect, especially if it's something that you can give out easily. Now, if I'm saying good things about the glitching status effect, why am I so down on this subclass still? Let's take a look at the wording here. Select a single tech creature or tech item within 15 feet. 15 feet. That is not very far when we are considering that you probably want to be doing like the long range sniper sort of stuff, taking cover, all that sort of stuff. So I think for the majority of combats, you're going to be outside of the range of the sabotage action, unfortunately. So this is cool. I think it is good as a single action activity. And this is something that is going to be repeatable. Like, you can do this on multiple different creatures or multiple different items, but note the failure trait here. The target is immune to your sabotage until the end of your next turn, or on a critical failure, the target is immune to your sabotage for 10 minutes. So, like, you can have turns where you take one shot and sabotage 2 different things, and that can be a good way to kind of support the party and potentially deny some actions. Sort of like you might do with something like Dazzle, where there is a decent chance that you end up having a significant impact, but sometimes it's not going to do anything. So next up is the Skirmisher, and this is the acrobatics focused one, and its exploit is you're trained to fight in close combat using pistols. Your ranged strikes with one-handed ranged weapons don't trigger reactions that are triggered by a ranged attack. And that is a fine ability, but I just don't know that if I am playing an operative that I am interested in doing one-handed ranged weapons as opposed to like big chonky hits and even chonkier crits. So I think this is fine but narrow, which is maybe not what I want for the acrobatics one, because acrobatics is such a great generic skill. And if you are going to keep getting skill feats for acrobatics and be able to pick up things like your kip up style feats for free without using your normal skill feats, I would want this one to be more generic and not applying to specific builds. The sniper is the stealth focused one, and your exploit bonus is that you get a first level class feat. You either get keep them in your sights or scope sight. Keep them in your sights increases the sort of power of the aim ability slightly. You can, when you aim, the benefits apply if your mark is either in your first or second range increment. And whether or not that matters really is reliant on the range increment of your weapon. There are plenty of weapons that have north of 100-foot range increments, and it just probably simply does not matter there. But if you are using a weapon that has a range increment of 20 feet, it's entirely a different story, right? And the other one is scope sight. Whenever you aim, you can interact to activate a sight weapon upgrade. And these are going to do things like increase the range of your weapon or increase your weapon increment. Although later on, these are going to be able to do things like allow you to see invisible creatures as well. The other exploit benefit here is that you ignore the unwieldy and volley traits of guns you wield belonging to the sniper group. I think this is the best generic one. And this would be the one that I would be looking at picking if I was playing this class. Because you kind of get 2 different exploit benefits. You ignore some negative traits of your guns, you get a first level class feat. And even if neither one of those things is crazy good, the 2 in conjunction, along with stealth being like a pretty reasonable skill, I think makes this one the best subclass. And then finally, the Striker is the one which transforms the playstyle significantly here. This is athletics based, which is a little weird. Well, I'm going to keep going. So its exploit is you have expert proficiency with one-handed melee weapons and unarmed attacks with the agile or finesse traits instead of martial guns. Whenever you increase your proficiency with martial guns, you instead increase your proficiency with these weapons. And then all your stuff that applies to guns, like your aim and stuff, will then apply to these strikes instead. You also get a reactive step action, or rather reaction, which when a creature within your reach leaves a square during a move action, you get to step up to twice directly towards the triggering creature. and this can kind of allow you to keep up with them. Specifically, like maybe keeping them from leaving your melee range if they just step. So this subclass feels a little weird to me in that you are a dex-based character and you are trading the ability to be very good at range for the ability to be good at melee, but you are not trading that for like big damage melee stuff. Like you are going to be dex-based, and so you are using these one-handed agile and finesse weapons, and you're maybe then also going into strength to add some extra flat damage onto your strikes and make it so that you can actually use the athletics skills. I am perhaps not sold that the class features here are good enough to make me want to play this subclass. Like, you're 8 HP, which is fine, but you're not 10 or 12 like you really might want to be if you are going to be playing in melee range all of the time. I guess that it is good that this exists to give different play patterns to the operative, and I guess you still have your training in simple guns. You've lost it for martial guns, so I guess you could still kind of have the ability to have a gun in one hand and have some decent options available to you. But this one's not for me. So I think overall the subclass options here are kind of mid, but I think that is to be expected given that the power budget of this class is in the additional proficiency with weapons, as well as the fact that some of the Starfinder guns are kind of juiced, honestly. All right, so let's talk about the best operative feats now. And in my opinion, I think operative feats largely fall into two categories. I think the feats are either super forgettable or insane, and there's not a lot of in between. I think a bunch of the feats, especially the first and second level feats, are pretty forgettable. But then kind of at fourth level, there's a couple of really good ones, and around 10th level, there's a couple of really, really good ones. So let's dive into it. Fourth level presents you with a major character choice, as Devastating Aim and Hampering Shot are both very, very good. Devastating Aim is kind of the mandatory damage increase feat, as you increase the precision damage dice from d4s to d6 from your aim action. And that is going to be a meaningful damage increase. But it is competing against Hampering Shot. You aim and then make a ranged strike against your mark. So that is normal action economy there, right? Aim and shot. So the next part is the bonus. If the strike hits, the creature becomes off guard until the end of your next turn. So not this turn, but the next turn. So this is kind of a choice between, do I take the selfish option, which increases my damage, or do I take the selfless option, which is going to go and make all of my party members having an easier time hitting this creature? And since it is off guard until the end of your next turn, assuming that that creature is still alive, you do get a benefit from your own hampering shot. And this may end up being a play pattern choice, where if you are already doing other 2-action activities, you might want to take Devastating Aim, and if you are not doing other 2-action activities, you might want to take Hampering Shot. When we get to 10th level, there are going to be some very, very strong 2-action activities that might make Hampering Shot not the thing that you go to anymore. Hair Trigger feels absolutely great. So this is going to require that you already aimed at a creature, and then the aimed creature does something that would trigger an attack of opportunity. So you attempt a ranged strike against the triggering creature, which is great. This is ranged attack of opportunity. It is slightly more narrow since it does require your aimed creature doing it. This is very comparable to what something like the Thaumaturge or the Ranger might be doing. This one gets a huge plus from me. I like this one a lot. And if Hair Trigger wasn't a 6th level feat, I would think Kick It into Overdrive was actually quite a bit better. So this is just free action once per hour. You become quickened until the end of your turn, and you can use the extra action only to stride. Now, there is a kicker here. You can instead choose to become quickened until the end of your next turn. So quicken this turn, quickened the next turn. So that is 2 actions for free. But at the end of this duration, you become fatigued for 2 rounds as your body recovers. Now, this might not actually matter too much in a lot of cases. If you use this at the beginning of the fight, yes, you are going to run into the fatigued. So if you are using this as the 2-action version to just super quickly approach an enemy, yeah, okay, you're going to run into the fatigue condition mattering. However, what if you use this on like turn 3 of a fight? Are you going to, still effectively be in that combat by the time that initiative comes up again? You might not be anymore. So this is a powerful action, but competition is so real here at 6th level. Hair Trigger is so strong. At 8th level, we see the next of our really good 2-action activities in Toppling Shot. So you aim and make a ranged strike. Again, that's the normal stuff. If the strike hits, the target is knocked back 5 feet. If this force movement would cause him to collide with a creature or object, both the target and the creature take bludgeoning damage equal to your aim damage. And on a critical hit, the target is also knocked prone. This is a lot for 2 actions. This is very strong. For the Pathfinder folks, the Acid Grip spell is absolutely amazing because that forced movement can do a lot of things, such as breaking one of your comrades free from a grapple effect. So this not only is giving you that Acid Grip effect, but you can do additional damage on top of that, kind of doubling the precision damage that you do. And if you crit, which you're somewhat likely to do as an operative with that higher accuracy, you also get knocking prone on top of this. So for 2 actions, this is aim, strike, forced movement, additional damage, and maybe also prone. That can kind of be 5 things for 2 actions. This is very, very strong. And while the early level feats on this class are unimpressive, you can see the appeal of some of these 2-action activities. 10th level gives Impeding Shot, which might be my favorite feat on this class. So, you aim and make a ranged strike, and then if the strike hits, the target is slowed 1 until the end of its next turn. No saving throw. Doesn't have to be a crit either. Just no saving throw, slowed 1. That is insane. So you are getting your normal bonus precision damage and slowing a creature with a huge degree of consistency. And if the target happens to be flying, it also falls 10 feet. We're going to consider that one irrelevant, and occasionally it will be a cool bonus. Oftentimes making something fall only 10 feet is not going to be enough to actually get it down to the ground, but just hyper consistent slow 1 is great. And we can kind of see some spellcaster type effects on this class, which I like a lot. And if Muzzle Flash wasn't competing with Impending Shot, Muzzle Flash would be pretty cool. So this is aim, make a ranged strike. If the strike hits, the target becomes dazzled until the end of your next turn if it's in your first range increment. So like Muzzle Flash is a great feat, but Impeding Shot is just too good. Level 12 Grazing Shot is really cool. It is a flourish, so you only need to do 1 flourish per turn. So, you make a ranged strike with your gun against your mark, and it gains the following failure effect. Your attack does minimum damage to the target. This is a really cool 3rd action if you already have map, and you're just like, I need to do some damage no matter what. This is always going to hit. And if you have, say, some sort of energy weapon that is going to be triggering a weakness, even if you miss, you are still going to get to trigger that weakness. I think this is a really cool feat. The 14th level feat Bullet Fever is pretty interesting. This is a once per hour reaction that is sort of like an orcish ferocity. If you would be knocked out, instead you're reduced to 1 HP, gain a number of temporary hit points equal to half of your level, increase your wounded value by 1, and enter a frenzy. And that frenzy automatically applies precision damage to all targets as though you were aiming, so that is going to save you some action economy. And you kind of do the like barbarian rage thing. You're taking a -1 penalty to AC, you're taking a -1 circumstance penalty to will saves. And you can't take any actions that don't have the attack or move traits except to reload your weapons. This is a good way to kind of stay out of the death spiral. One of the things that can kind of really hamper a party's ability to finish off a fight is having to waste a bunch of actions picking up items, standing up, healing downed comrades, and it can eat up like half of your action economy within a turn cycle if you are a 4-person party, as one person's turn might be spent moving and doing a 2-action heal spell. The other person might have to stand, pick up a weapon, and maybe pick up multiple things. And I don't even want to have to think about like what happens if you have 3 sets of arms and you go down and you drop all of that gear. That a lot of gear to pick up. So I think Bullet Fever is a powerful reaction. Like, it's no hair trigger in that, like, hair trigger is something that you might use close to every turn cycle. But when Bullet Fever matters, it is going to matter a lot. Bullet Dance at 18th level is pretty cool. This is kind of 5 actions. It's stride, make up to 3 range strikes. And the important part is that these have to be against different creatures, but each attack doesn't count towards your multiple attack penalty until after you've already made all of the attacks. So this is 3 full accuracy attacks and some strides in there as well. Thumbs up. But it is competing against Kill Shot, which, oh buddy. So you aim and then make a range strike against your mark. If the attack is a success, you deal maximum damage. No rolls, just maximum damage outright. And on a critical success, you roll the damage results normally, but if the double damage would be less than the result of the maximum damage on a normal success, you use the maximum damage instead. If you spend 3 actions and your attack was a critical success, then you deal the maximum damage and double the damage of that result as normal. And I want you to just kind of think about the idea of firing off some weapon with a fatal D12 trait and then critting on this. The numbers that this class is going to be capable of reaching are it's going to be crazy. It is going to be absolutely absurd, and I can't wait to see the like post there. It's like, I just crit for 250 damage on my Gunslinger. Here's how I did it. Like, I think that sort of stuff is going to be very possible with Killshot. Overall, what do I think of the Operative? I think this is my least favorite class that I have kind of reviewed and gone over so far. I think it is a well-designed class. I think it has some very, very powerful features, especially once you get to, 6th level for hair trigger, 10th level for impeding shot. But I feel like many of the individual things are misses for me. Like, I don't love the subclasses. I feel like most of what you get from the class is just your accuracy. And one of the things I like about Pathfinder is that at most levels, you get something very, very meaningful when you level up. And I don't know that that is the case being the Operative. The first feat that I highlighted was at level 4. So if you are starting at like your campaign at level 1, like you level up to 2, then 3, then 4 before you get something good. In my estimation, something good. And like you just have to be happy with your increased proficiency in guns for a while, which admittedly is pretty good. But I think this one isn't for me. I think it is a well-designed class, but I like intricate moving parts quite a bit, and I feel like my Operative is often going to kind of do the same thing in a lot of turns of combat. Like, it is so hard to just not use something like impeding shot once you have it, and if my character operates as if it is on autopilot, I feel like that does not allow me to kind of use my tactical edges and knowledge as a player to gain advantages in combat. So I think this class is a miss for me personally, but I think a lot of people are going to enjoy playing this one. So if you have different thoughts about this one, like, please throw it down in the comments below. If you think I have missed some interaction, or you're like, hey, this specific gun makes this class cracked, please let me know. I am looking forward to reading more and learning more about Starfinder 2nd Edition. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. See ya!